Dank u wel.
Dankjewel, Bas. Die zet zijn leaseauto weer terug. Wat een mooi verhaal, Bas. En dankzij jou ook niet meer ingewikkeld. Nou, een beetje, maar erg leuk, echt PINC verhaal. We gaan door naar onze laatste spreker voordat wij koffie krijgen. And that's Claire Elsdon. And Claire really stands for the letters PINC. People, Ideas, Nature and Creativity. At PINC we often talk about following your dream. And Claire did follow her dream. She gave up her work and traveled the world on a motorcycle. And while traveling, she saw the differences in education and living conditions in several countries, and decided to do something to make a difference. She founded Piccadilly and started the first ladies' motorcycle mechanics workshop in Mwanza in Tanzania to support the motorcycle ambulances and make sure that midwives arrive safe and in time in remote areas. And we're very happy she's here with us today. And that's quite nice, actually, because she lives in a very remote area herself. When we booked her ticket, her flight ticket, from Mwanza to Nairobi, the airline had a note about luggage saying you can either bring a suitcase or a bucket of fish. Well, she decided to bring a suitcase and her story, and she's with us today. So give a warm welcome to Claire Elsdon.
Hi, morning everybody. Now, I just wanted to tell you about the story of how I came to be here today. I haven't always spent my life doing these amazing things, wearing these dungarees. It actually took me 5 years to put these on. And it's not because it's got a particularly complex fastening or a zip structure that I couldn't work out. My life was just in a different place. So 5 years ago, as I say, it wasn't about these dungarees. I was wearing a suit and high heels, and I was a stockbroker in the city, which I'd been doing for 7 years by this point. Even though in many respects it was kind of an interesting job, it didn't make me happy. I used to spend 12 hours a day, honestly, pretty anxious, pretty stressed, and having this kind of innate sense of dread, because I felt like the thing that I was doing every day was not aligned with what I felt my purpose should be at all. I was like a commentator and a critic, but I wasn't really contributing anything to the world as I saw it, and that bothered me deeply, like really deeply. At the same time, though, fortunately, that's not all my life was. I was not only a banker, I was also a biker. It started off initially as a commute to get from work to and fro from work in the morning, because I started work at 6:30 on the dot, so I had to be fully functioning by that point. And what better way than riding a motorbike? But it soon also took me to off-roading to far and distant lands, and it gave me this precious release from P&Ls, fear and greed, computer screens, into joy, connection, nature, and feeling truly alive, which I loved. But despite this love, I still couldn't kind of figure out what my life should look like. And it all came to a head about 5 years ago. My gran, who at the time was, I should know this, it's awful, in her late 80s, we'll say that much. She's always been a very strong woman, like the sort of old lady who would jump on and off buses with groceries as heavy as she was. Like she was a fit, strong woman. And all of a sudden, one day, I got a call from my parents to say that she'd had a fall in her care home. And it was quite a nasty one. She'd actually broken both the bones in her arm, which is really, really horrible. So she had to go to hospital and have an operation to get it fixed. So I went to see her the next day in hospital. And it was shocking, actually, just how it seemed like almost overnight. She'd shrunken down. And I'll never forget looking at her as I stared down the hospital bed. She'd suddenly shrunken down into being this fragile, vulnerable old lady, tiny in her bed. And we were just talking about how she was feeling, what she was up to, that kind of thing. She didn't really know what was going on in my life, particularly, but out of nowhere, she said to me, "Claire, I wish that when I was your age, I'd done the things that I'd really wanted to do, and not the things that other people expected me to do, and I wish I'd been braver." And these words really hit home, because you often see BuzzFeed, top 10 things people say before they die. And it's always things like that. By the way, she's not died, she's still with us. I want to make that really clear. It's kind of, she's here. But the point is when your grandmother says that to you, and you know that you have this innate feeling in your heart that you're wasting your life right now, and that somehow you're not living the life that you should be living, it's a really tough thing. But what a gift. what a gift that she was showing me. Don't let this be you. Don't let the rest of your life slip by and one day wake up yourself in a care home sipping Horlicks, thinking, oh, I had this amazing dream of something I wanted to do, and I never did it because of fear. And by the way, the thing that I really wanted to do, that I used to dream about when I got home from work and watch videos about and all kinds of things, it's kind of sad actually, but I used to watch DVDs about people riding overland from London to Cape Town. Usually, though, I must say, it's usually two guys with a massive support crew, mechanics, so they might have a military background. You'd think they were going to war, but no. They're simply trying to explore a part of the world. That wasn't my vision. I just wanted to do it on my own. But I'd always been too afraid of what might happen to me if I did it. But in that moment, I suddenly realized, for me, there could be nothing more frightening than seeing my life slip away and living with regret later. And there's no way you can press rewind. So that was it. I decided to do it. One of the toughest things, though, was not actually making the decision. That was actually really easy in the end. It was other people's reactions. And no sooner did I start to tell people what I was going to do, quit my job, get on a motorbike, ride from here to Cape Town, wonderful. You start getting other people's versions of truth, which generally, by the way, are not based on truth. It's based on fear and definitely not on information. And I'll never forget one guy said to me, he heard what I was going to do, and he urged me to reconsider, which I couldn't. And he said to me, Claire, I hope you've made peace with what is almost certainly going to happen to you. Which was a very shocking thing to say. Because, what a terrible, terrible statement. But I just thought, I think that's his stuff, not mine. And I'm just going to see what happens. And even if I have to stop and something terrible happens, let's just find out. Now, time is precious. I only have 15 minutes. It's ticking away. I wish I could tell you the highs and lows of that trip, because they were incredible. But I don't really have the time. But suffice to say, I rediscovered life in a way that was just purely joyful. There were some challenges. I nearly got trampled by elephants and nearly died a few times, but it was wonderful. It was wonderful. And the people, by the way, honestly restored my faith in humanity, the trust thing that David talked about. If you really make yourself vulnerable to communities by being on a motorbike with no cage around you like you would for a car, and you just explore places, it's incredible how people in the countries I visited, even in places with a lot of history of conflict and war and famine, so generous. But anyway, the main point about this story is, by the time I got to Malawi, and I think I actually have some slides here. Yeah, this is me leaving the country. By the time I got to Malawi, I knew that also I wanted to contribute something in some way to the communities that I was visiting. And I kind of thought somehow I might be able to do that with my finance background, and so I asked a microfinance charity if I could get involved somehow. And they said, yeah, by all means do that. But the thing is, we don't really need your finance expertise. We're kind of covered. But we do have 80 motorbikes, and they're just not running at all well. In fact, they're constantly breaking down. We're having crashes, and they're costing us so much money in repairs and downtime. We might have to stop this project completely. So can you just come, figure out what's going wrong, and fix it? Like, that's just like the easiest thing ever. And of course, I slightly freaked out. I'm honest, I slightly freaked out because I thought, well, what do I know? I mean, all I've been doing is my maintenance every day. By the time I got to there, from London to Malawi, it was 27,000 kilometers. I mean, I hadn't had a breakdown or a puncture through the whole journey, and I'd been doing a lot of off-roading and sand, dirt, rock, mud, the whole shebang. It hadn't broken down, and it was my little ritual every day that I would do this, just a few minutes in the morning. My way of showing the bike some love in the hope that if I got into a dodgy situation, the bike would love me back and get me out of there with no annoying puncture or breakdown. It had worked quite well. So anyway, I got there, and they said, yeah, can you see what you can do? I wasn't sure, but actually when I turned up, it turned out that these guys genuinely, I mean, they're microfinance guys, they don't know buttons about motorbikes. These bikes were hanging, and they did no maintenance. So I was like, oh, bonza, I actually do know the answer to this one. Great, maybe it's a fluke. So I decided what I'd do is to write a manual called Love Your Motorcycle, which is all about the things you need to do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to keep your motorbike in tip-top condition, to extend its lifespan, and to keep yourself safe in the process. So I wrote this manual. I then went round to all the different loan officers, teaching them how to do this basic maintenance. And a lot of people have said to me, these guys aren't going to listen to you, you're a white face, you're a woman. And yeah, that did come up, and they were surprised to see me. But actually, they were so relieved that someone was finally explaining something to do with motorbike maintenance, because anyone who's ever had a breakdown in the middle of nowhere, or been unable to do their job, or had a crash, never ask somebody, particularly in my experience, like in Tanzania or Malawi, have you ever had a crash? Because the minute you do, they start rolling up like sleeves, and they show you the most horrific scars. So these guys have been inconvenienced by it, don't get this wrong. So anyway, it was brilliant fun doing this training, but I kind of got home, and by the time I got to Cape Town, brilliant trip, 40,000 kilometers, an amazing time, still no breakdowns or punctures, amazingly. Got back to London, and still didn't have this answer as to what my career really needed to look like. So I went back into the city and pretty much did my old job again. And the sad part about this is that 2 weeks after I resumed my old job back in the city, my trusty motorbike that had carried me safely all this way was stolen. And I've still never seen it again since. Boom, gone. Which was heartbreaking, like awful. Maybe it shouldn't have been, but it became my best friend, that thing. And I think if it hadn't been stolen, I'd have probably continued to tell stories about what happened on the trip, and that would have been my one thing I did, and it would have been fantastic at the end of it. But because it was stolen, I had to move on. And interestingly, a couple of conversations then started happening. Long story short, I was invited to travel to Tanzania, again, this time to train midwives how to maintain motorbikes in southern Tanzania for a small organization that puts typically healthcare workers on motorbikes in developing countries where there are like a lot of people living in a rural environment who have very poor access to healthcare. And the idea of this was that the midwives would go out on the motorbikes, visit the women. You know, in Tanzania, over 85% of the population live in rural areas. Visit these women, check up on them, and tell them about the importance of going to hospital to give birth, that kind of thing. The reason why they were so keen to do that is because in Tanzania, the maternal mortality rate is extremely high. It's devastating. There's typically 24 women die every day in pregnancy and childbirth in Tanzania through preventable causes. And I've got to the point in my life now where a lot of my close friends, my sister, they're all having beautiful babies, but a lot of my friends have had tricky births. And when you start thinking about your own friends being the ones on those 24 women dying every day through reasons that you could have prevented, I find that heartbreaking. So I was really motivated to go to Tanzania to start doing this training. Sorry, I'm going behind my slides. So this was part of the project. We explained it to the community as well, and this was just a lovely interaction with some of the ladies there. But what also amazed me while I was there is that I noticed how many motorbikes were just everywhere being used as motorbike taxis. Even in the last 3 years, the numbers had exploded. And I spoke to the guy that was hosting me in Tanzania, and I was like, wow, this is great, there's bikes everywhere, yeah, great. And he's like, well, yes, Claire, there are, but the problem that you're not seeing is that the guys riding the motorbikes don't have licenses. Like, really, you'll be amazed to find one who does. No one's had training. People have pretty much gone straight from being on a bicycle to riding a motorbike. And the consequence of that is that now, according to WHO statistics, it's one of the leading causes of death, certainly in Africa, is crashes on road crashes. And 43% of those road deaths are coming from pedestrians and two-wheelers, bicycles and motorbikes, which is shocking. It's actually now a greater problem than malaria and HIV are road traffic accidents. And when you hear that, and then you start really looking at the way these guys are driving, the fact they have no helmets, the fact their bikes are hanging, which certainly is not the biggest contributor, but if your front brake doesn't work, that is going to have consequences. I started thinking to myself, well, what could I do about that? Like, I feel like I'm in a position that I could do something, but I haven't got an idea what. So I went back to the UK, went back to my job again. And I just happened to be having a conversation one day with a very wise friend. I mentioned in passing the fact that I was really struggling with my job, and it's 12 hours a day, but what are you going to do? It's a job, blah, blah, blah. And she said to me, this is insane. You're kind of not even questioning that you do a job that you fundamentally really don't like. You're dedicating over half your waking hours to it. If you could just prise open your imagination for a moment, I'm paraphrasing, that's basically what she said. What would you do? What would your job be, if anything was possible? And I sort of said to her, well, I guess I would be like a motorbike maintenance, I don't know, like consultant or like trainer or something. She's like, yeah. And I said, yeah. And she said, tell me what your day would be like if you had a perfect world. And I said, well, I'd probably live in Africa somewhere, I guess probably East Africa, talked through how my day would look like. And she said, well, why don't you do that? This sounds great. Why don't you do that? And I said, Angela, motorbike maintenance consultant isn't a thing. Nobody does that. It's not a thing. You can't just make it up. And she's very wise, my friend Angela. So she said, okay, just humor me. Write all this down on a piece of paper, what you'd like your life to be like. Pin it up in the bathroom. Just do that. So I did. Thing is, Angela's very, very smart. She's not a biker, but she does know about the theme of target fixation, which is what you get taught as a biker, which is basically whatever you are looking towards and focusing on, even if it's a tree that you don't want to hit, if that's what you're looking towards, that's what you're going to hit. So basically, what she was saying is, if I put this somewhere that you can spot every day, it's going to start filtering into your brain. And it did. Within, I think, 6 months, I'd quit my job. And last year, so another sort of 3-4 months later, I moved to Tanzania to start Piccalilli. By the way, so the name Piccalilli, in Swahili, a piki is a motorbike. And lily is the flower of women in connection. The idea was we'd start a basic motorbike maintenance workshop, providing maintenance to a really high standard, because again, the colleges haven't kept up, nobody really knows exactly what they're doing. But also the apprentices would be women, because there are very few opportunities for women in engineering in Africa. And also, women typically reinvest like over 80% of their income back into their children, into their education, and that's something I wanted to encourage. When I say we moved to Tanzania, I say that defensively, it was just me. So, and I would just like to explain a bit here. I moved to Tanzania to a town, Mwanza, beautiful place. I didn't really know anybody. I'd just been there for a week and thought it had a good vibe. I didn't speak Swahili. I had no funding and basically no friends. I mean, loads in the world, but none really there. But for some reason, I doggedly, as ever, thought that this felt like the right thing to do. Now, suffice to say, the first 3 to 4 months were extremely hard. I moved into a house which was already, it turned out, occupied by a vibrant community of rats and cockroaches. And the sanitation wasn't great, and within a few months I was hospitalized with amoebic dysentery. But despite all of that, I was still convinced that this was the right thing to do, that I had to be there, and I just needed to continue a bit longer to work out my path. Long story short, I started meeting the right people that I needed to meet. I met who is now our co-director in Piccalilli. We found a pile of rubble, which turned out to be our workshop. We managed to crowdfund the build of that workshop, which we now have. And once we kind of actually were present and people started finding out what we were up to, we were then asked to do some community projects, which I care a lot about, and it comes back to the maternal health theme. This is a motorbike ambulance, a very nice piece of kit. 400 of these went into Tanzania about 4 years ago. There are 4 of those in the neighboring district in Mwanza, a population of 700,000 people, where currently they only have 1 ambulance that works, or I should say is available, half the time. So if you're a mama trying to give birth somewhere out in a village, you've got to find your own transport, and for a lot of people, that's impossible. So the fact is, when I was called to meet with the district medical officer in Sengerema, he had 4 of these things sitting under a tree, rotting. No one had ever really understood how to maintain them properly, and they didn't understand the value of it. They actually thought maybe these bikes were weak. They're not, but they do need a bit of maintenance. So essentially, we came to an agreement. I wanted to renovate them, but not only that, I wanted to also train women to be riders in these things, dedicated riders who understood how to ride a motorbike and a sidecar, off-road especially, how to maintain this to keep it running. Because I strongly believe, and in fact I know, that if you maintain these things properly, they are actually really cost-effective. Potentially, over the course of a year, we could be saving 4,000 lives easily with this, with just 2 trips a day per bike, and impacting tens of thousands of families. I hear stories every day of people who lose mothers in childbirth, and it affects the entire family, and it ruins people's prospects of progression, and it's heartbreaking. So this is something we're doing, and I didn't see that coming, but it's, ultimately we've started now renovating the first 2 of these motorbikes. My love would be to actually renovate all 400. Let's see if that's possible. But it's a chronic wastage at the moment, and these things could be doing so much good in the community. Also, a surprising thing happened. I was invited to go to Mali, which I don't know what your geography is like, but it's Tanzania's southern half, East Africa. Mali's way over out west. I was invited about a month ago by a FTSE 100 company to travel over to Mali to train their riders in motorbike maintenance and road safety, because the crash rate amongst their riders, their workers, was extremely high. And 3,000 of their workers have motorbikes, so it's a big problem. Now, it's kind of stunned me that they couldn't find anyone a bit closer to home than Tanzania, but apparently motorbike maintenance consultants aren't a thing. So it was just me. Who knew? So I had a lot of fun. I basically reinvented the Love Your Motorbike manual. This is Love Your Motorbike, Love Your Life, which is the road safety side as well. We got the local sign writer, who's a really cool guy, to do some illustrations. And I also realized something really cool. The other problem we have with the motorbike maintenance thing is not people's appetite to learn. The learning side is people are very open to it. But there's a lack of tools. So if you tell somebody your minimum tread depth on your tire should be 3 millimeters, You know, it's like, whew, how are you going to check that? But what I discovered is, bottle tops, everybody buys soda in Africa, rightly or wrongly, and or beer. The frilly part on the edge, can I get this to work? The frilly part, this part, on the edge of a bottle top, by some miracle, is 3 millimeters deep. So anybody who buys a soda or a beer can simply take their bottle top, take the front of their tyre, and see if they can lose the frilly bit in the main part of the tyre. That's the bit that matters. And if they can, the tyre's safe. And if not, the tyre should be replaced. And actually, when you start kind of running lessons on that basis that everybody can accept and understand, it's really good fun. So we started doing lots of stuff like that. That's me and Marley. This is the workshop now. So basically, it's incredible the number of directions this project started to go in. And the thing is, the real message for me as well is, I'm really tired of hearing people saying that motorbikes are dangerous. You know that statistic I told you earlier, which is the 43% of road deaths happen to people on 2 feet and 2 wheels? Who here thinks that walking should be banned and everyone should have their feet chopped off? I think not. But for some reason, motorbikes get demonized. But the thing that you need to realize is that in so many places, in places like Tanzania, there aren't cars and cars physically can't get there. So for a lot of people, in particular women, motorbikes are the answer. So it's not just about trying to save lives in terms of reducing the number of traffic accident deaths. It's also about saving them and helping to bring beautiful babies into the world without seeing their mothers die in the process. So I hope that we can start to maybe reinvent the thought around what motorbikes are really for. And for me, it's just amazing to see how much interest there is in this project, because it's something that I really think people have missed this point, but they can do fantastic good. So in my final 20 seconds, I have a challenge for you. What would your dungarees look like? And I don't literally mean that you should all wear dungarees. This is my personal choice, and I'm very comfortable with it. What I mean to say is, what aspects of your life are you living to suit other people? Or what aspect of your life is dictated by fear, which isn't actually based on anything? I suspect there are people in this audience who are doing things, making choices which are based on beliefs or fears that they have which aren't really justified. And if we just apply a little bit of courage and imagination, the world can be an amazingly different place. And I wonder what could be possible if we did that. Thank you.
Claire Elsdon. What a lovely presentation, Claire. Thank you very much. And you leave us with a very nice question that we'll take with us today, during coffee, during all breaks. And you seem to be the happiest motorcycle consultant I've ever seen. Oké, it's coffee time. En voordat we dat gaan doen, ik heb 3 dingen